back to that. So for me, I'm from the Stockbridge tribe, but also I am Menominee. Stockbridge is over by Bowler, where our homestead is. And we were actually, our homelands are over in New York, Massachusetts area. And they were forced out of the area, and they came to Wisconsin, where the Menominee people welcomed them, gave them land, and this is where we live today. And one of the things that they brought along with them were seeds. So if seeds were just as important to our ancestors, that they carried them across the country to be able to live by themselves, we wanted to make that a part of our lives as well. And that's when we started talking about homesteading and gardening and how we can connect to our ancestors through language, through grounding ourselves with the dirt. Yeah.
There's a Ojibwe lady, her name is Brooke Amon, who talks about that our culture was like a blanket. And when, you know, the reservation era, the boarding school era, that blanket got torn to shreds. And now what we're doing is we're piecing that blanket back together. And she said that it may never look the same as it did, but it's going to keep us warm. I really, really, really like that idea of bringing those pieces back together. Like, we look to Wade. Wade does a lot of farming or gardening, and he gave us seeds of potatoes, like all these different potatoes. And so we grow, I don't know how many different varieties now.
9. 9 different potatoes.
Yeah, and they're beautiful. They're all different colors, and they taste so good. And
they're like purple. They look like little gems.
Well, we really depend on the knowledge of our community, and not just our Menominee community, not just our Stockbridge community, but a greater community. And like Lucy was saying with the seeds, part of this reclamation, like, because we're doing this work, then other people who are also doing the work want to share. And so we've got friends that are doing homesteading in Oneida. We've got friends that are doing homesteading in Stockbridge, in Menominee, and each of them has a little bit of knowledge, right? A little bit of knowledge that was passed on to them. And so we're bringing all these people together and learning, relearning all these different ways of planting, of gathering, of really living a true Indigenous style. And it's not that different from our ancestors. You know, this area here, this Door County area, has been forever. I'm sure you guys have people coming in from all over in the summertime to come and vacation and shop and be a part of this amazing peninsula, right? I don't think that's very different from what was happening in the 1600s. That this was an area where there were Menominee, there were Oneida, there were Potawatomi, there were Meskwaki and Sac and Fox, Ho-Chunk, all coming together because of the beauty of this place and the richness of the land, that we shared this area as a trading center, right? And so we've met with the Seed Savers Exchange, and they helped us to bring back, they call it rematriation of seeds. And they gave this list of all of the indigenous seeds that they have. And we went through it, and we picked out seeds that were part of kind of a Great Lakes, a greater Great Lakes area, because we believe that, you know, when people came and collected seeds, when they collected objects, sometimes they would mislabel them. Or if they collected a Stockbridge seed from a Menominee person, they would call it a Menominee seed, you know, just because of where they got it and who they got it from. So we think that a lot of these seeds are part of a greater trade network, a Great Lakes trade network, and maybe even further out into, like, we looked at Arikara and Hidatsa, because they were all part of this larger trade network that we had. And so we base a lot of our seeds on that greater network, because we know that we weren't living in isolation. Menominees didn't just stick with Menominee and that was it. We had this greater network of people that we learned from. And it's true today.
Yeah, still today with our Indigenous seed-saving friends, we'll get together with them, share knowledge, share teachings, share mistakes that we've made with the homestead, things that we've learned. We're constantly learning and trying and experimenting within the garden, so being able to share that with people so they don't make the same mistake, or maybe they know something that we don't. The seeds, can you go back to like how the Menominee, how they were able to re-find their squash seed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've all heard, it's kind of a famous story that there was somebody that was tilling their garden or their farm and came across a cache. Like I was talking about the storage pits near the garden beds here. Same thing happened where they found a clay vessel with seeds in it, and they were able to bring those seeds back. And there's these big, huge orange squashes now that exist that are like 800 years old, come from a seed stock from way back when. And people are trading that now. And I've traded it with Navajo people when I went down to New Mexico for a conference. So like the seed network is greater, which I believe happened even back pre-contact days.
Yeah, and we have those seeds now because our ancestors were able to save them. So it's pretty cool to like hold them in your hand or see the whole life cycle of, you know, you're holding a bean and now you can grow it and eat it and harvest it and make amazing meals with it. Such a passion, we get so excited. So this is a picture of me, and I'm planting tobacco. So we have a lot of friends who will drop off plants, drop off seeds. They know that we do this, so they want to support it. So we had a whole tray of tobacco plants that someone had dropped off, and that was me adding it to our garden. On the right, this is a picture. You can see the garden is starting to grow. And this was our first year, so we planted right down the middle of our row. And now, after doing it another year, we've added plants not only in the top, but like onto the sides as well, to kind of utilize all parts of the garden. Along with our fence line around the whole garden, we were able to use that to have birdhouse gourds climbing up, anything viney, some grape plants, grapevines.
Yeah, you really don't understand why we planted in those ridge and furrows until you get out there and plant in the ridge and furrows and see what it's like. So we found that there's different microclimates, you know, as you go up and then back down. And also it helps save the water. When we would water the ridges, the water would collect down in the furrows. And you could see it in the soil, how dark it was after we watered. So it was really a place that we were able to experiment and really get an understanding of what the land is, what the land can provide, and what we can give back to the land as well.
And with our garden rows, there's so many different layers. We had layers of compost, layers of dirt, layers of hay, like all of these different layers squashed onto each other, and that really helped with the self-irrigation system. You know, it rained, but it really trapped in that water, so it was feeding the thirst, even though it wasn't raining or we were not watering the garden.
This is you.
This is me. I love sunflowers. So on the left, we had seen online a sunflower house. So imagine like a horseshoe shape. So we actually made it come to life with our niece and our nephew. They came and they were in charge of all the planting. We told them the idea, they ran with it. So this is some of the plants starting to pop up with our sunflowers. And then on the right is a picture of a full blooming sunflower. And then we also have bees. So you can see, like, we planted the flower, we have the bees, and now they're doing their thing. They're pollinating. You can see them around on the homestead. But with having our niece and nephew come, I'm a teacher. I was thinking, I'm going to teach them this, this, and this. Well, I was so wrong. They came in and they taught us. So we talked a lot of the intergenerational learning. We have elders who come. My dad was a farmer growing up, so this is totally his element. So he comes and he teaches. We have Ben's mom comes and teaches us different things, but I expect it from elders. I know they're going to teach us things, but for the littles, it was just so surprising to me that they came. And, Genevieve was 6 or 7 at the time, our niece, and she's like, you need more flowers in the garden. And we're like, you're right. We do need more flowers in the garden. So she started planting little flowers around with the vegetables, and it made so much sense for our bees.
It brought the insects in, it brought the bees in, it brought in all the pollinators, and so we have this polycultural garden now because of the knowledge that was given to us by a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And what about your dad? What did your dad teach us?
Oh, my dad needed a place to rest in the garden, which is so important, and that's not something we had thought of. If we have people over, they're helping, the elders, they need a place to sit. I need a place to sit too. So the royal we built a bench for the middle of the garden, and it's not only a resting bench, but at the end of the day or beginning of the day, we can go out there and we can admire what we've built and what we've created.
Yeah, and it's a lot of what we do in our garden is reflection, thinking about what are the things that we learned from the land, what are the things that we learned from the animals and the insects. How do you battle a woodchuck from getting into your garden? It took me a long time to get him to quit being in there, but with a little bit of time and a little bit of patience and a little bit of ingenuity, you figure these things out.
And all of our watermelon.
Yeah. Yeah.
The woodchuck. So this is an example of the garden in full bloom. The little red specks are tomatoes that are ready to pick. The purple is oregano. The first 2 rows in the garden are all different herbs that will self-seed. So each year they just pop right back up and they've doubled in size. Hummingbirds, butterflies, honeybees, anything you can think of, spiders, garden spiders, snakes, all of the wildlife flock to those flowery rows. So it's really neat to see each year how they pop back up again. In the background, you can see sunflowers are up. That was our little sunflower house.
Remember, Lucy got really scared of the snake when we first saw it in there. and we were telling my mom about this, and she reminded me that Grandpa always kept a snake in his garden because it was rodent control, right?
I like the snake better after that, after learning a little more. Okay, so here's me on the left, and I was shucking beans, and those were Stockbridge beans, which is so important to me because I am Stockbridge. So I was able to get them and grow them and harvest them to share out, to eat, to share with people who want to garden as well. In the middle, we had planted popcorn one year, and it was like Christmas opening up the cobs of corn. They all look so different. They're all diverse. It's just like us. We're so different, but we need the same things to grow. So that was really eye-opening to rip open each corn cob and see what they looked like. Oh, Wade, there's your potatoes up in the corner. All of the beautiful potatoes. And what else? Some tomatoes and basil. We do a lot of, the goal is to have an outdoor kitchen one day. We did a lot of the preparing and preserving the food out on the back deck, which is so fun. We're able to go right into the garden, then come onto the deck and start washing it, cutting it, preparing it for all of the recipes. We do lots of dehydrating, freezing, freeze drying, canning, lots of different ways to grow the food, but then preserve it to share within the community, our friends, our family. Yeah.
It's kind of like Field of Dreams, when you build it, then they come. All of the seeds came to us, the elders came to us, the children came to us with the knowledge that they wanted to share. Because people are really interested in this. And just they have as much interest as we do. Yeah, and it really is. It's because we were taken out of our classrooms for a while, we really learned how to diversify the way that we approach education. And that's what we're bringing back to our, as we're transitioning back into classrooms or others, we're taking this knowledge that we did learn, that was passed on through generations through our ancestors, that was passed on through years of Facebook posts, through all of these different ways of learning are valid and important and can be built upon and create a culture that is, like Brooke Amon said, we're bringing these pieces of blanket back together, we're putting it back together. It may not look the same, but it's going to keep us warm. And so that's what we're working with. We're building back up towards a knowledge of our ancestry, our Menominee roots, our ancient roots.
Yes, Let's talk about the homestead name. We've named the homestead. It's Ancient Roots Homestead, and we wanted to identify and acknowledge that we are not only Indigenous, we have other things as well, but even everybody sharing their knowledge with us, it comes from all different ways of life. So we wanted to take that all and put it into a name. So we came up with Ancient Roots Homestead. Yeah.
It really gives honor to my Menominee roots, but also my English roots, my Irish roots, my Scottish roots, my French roots, all of Lucy's roots. Mm-hmm. And also the people that come to visit and share their knowledge with us. We want to make sure that this is a learning place. It's not just an Indigenous homestead. It's not just purely Indigenous. We are open to where we all come from. Us as Nate Pamatasewak. All of my fellow human beings have a part in what this is and what it can become.
Before we move this slide, I want to talk a little bit about the food. The food is medicine in whatever culture you are from. You gather, you get together as a family, as friends, and you eat food. So really, all of these pictures, to me, show that food is medicine. We're able to laugh together, cook together, share together. So one of our favorite things to do is to invite our family and our friends over for garden parties. There's a little work. You got to harvest the stuff from the garden, and then we cook it and prepare a meal and really have a lot of fun with doing that with our friends and our family. So food is medicine. That's what I get from those photos.
Any little inn that we can insert education into, we do, no matter what. You have to.
So these are our chickens. They rest in peace. A raccoon got all of them day after day. We were learning a lot. We had them for a full season, almost a season and a half, before the raccoon came and just figured it all out. But our goal this coming year is to get chickens again, start up with that. But they were so much fun to have, like having little critters and wildlife a part of your homestead. They would free range, they would eat the bugs, they would provide us with eggs. It was so much fun every day going outside and creating that learning opportunity, like whether it be just me or with people we have over. They were able to do chicken chores with us and learn about chickens and eggs and the whole life cycle. And that's...
You want to talk about the native prairie plants?
Yes. So we live in Bowler, Wisconsin, and we're right on the edge of the town of Bowler. And when we created our homestead, we stopped mowing the lawn because we wanted to restore our native prairie of plants. We wanted to see what was growing under all that grass, what would pop up. Well, then we got a letter from the township saying to mow your lawn or we're gonna mow it for you. So we went to their township board meeting, and we told them we were teachers and what we were doing, and they loved it and they wanted to know more. We invited them to come see it. They have not yet. Maybe they're seeing it from the road. But we put up signs about native prairie plants. We're not mowing, we're not spraying, we're not using anything. It's all going to be natural.
You hear a difference when you go outside at night. If we had a mowed lawn, it's like a cacophony of sound when you go outside because of all the insects that have now recreated their homes in our prairie lands. Insects, birds, hummingbirds, so many things have made their way back into our little homestead and are now sharing. Yes, they're sharing some of our vegetables,
produce.
But that's part of it, right? That's something we're nourishing ourselves. We're also nourishing the animals, and even if we're doing battle, that's all good. Yeah.
One time we had a tribal elder come over, and she was telling stories outside of our garden, and I was talking a lot about, like, please excuse the weeds. We haven't, been weeding a ton. Like, I was apologizing for us not weeding. And she was like, do you know there's no word in our language for weed? Because it is actually, like, all of the plants are helpers. So even though it may look like a weed or it's not producing fruit or vegetables for you, it still has a job within the whole ecosystem of the garden.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I love that. So when she shared that teaching with us, I share it every chance I'm able to because that made so much sense to me and to our homestead and our garden.
Yeah, it's really about a change of perspective in all of these things, and educating about it as well, and thinking about how can we make an impact in our community of Bowler, by going into the board and educating about what a polyculture looks like and why we're doing it and what we hope to accomplish with it, to having our kids and our young one learn about the garden.
Yeah. So this is a picture of me doing some beekeeping. I had some sugar water to feed them.
That's a posed picture, by the way. She was very scared of the bees.
I was, yeah. I was totally scared of them. This was our first, we've just finished our second year with bees, and I'm getting to really love them. The bees love singing when I sing to them, so I really do a lot of singing while I'm out over by the bees, just in case. But yeah, I was super afraid of them at first because, I don't know, they sting. But they're really cool to see and to watch, and if I'm amazed by it and so are you, like, to share that out with the community is really awesome. Right. We had some college students and some high school students come for their It was our first field trip. We
Yeah.
hosted a field trip, and we had a whole day where some kids came and we did different beekeeping workshops, stations that they could do. So that was really neat. We were able to get all of the beekeeping attire that they could wear so they could be safe and not scared. And they were able to check everything out and open up the beehive and see what was going on in there. That was really, really cool.
Yeah, and then they helped us seed part of our prairie as well. We created those seed bombs. So the kids came in, they made the seed bombs. Everybody knows what seed bombs is? We take organic compost and put prairie seeds in there and a little bit of clay powder, and you put just a little bit of water in there to make like a little ball, and then the kids take them and just chuck them into the lawn, and then they land, and then over time the rains will kind of wash the clay out and give you a little area where prairie plants will come up.
Just think if we made that the norm, we could
Yeah.
have little like totes of them and just throw them out the window, throw
Right.
them into the ditches.
So this is a photo by Pitaepanuhkiw. Jeff Grignon is my older cousin. He grew up in my grandfather's house with my grandfather and my grandmother, and he has been able to he was able to spend time with my grandparents when he was young. He's a little older than I am. He's about Wade's age, I think. Sorry, I'm teasing Wade. And so he got to experience a little bit more of the language. Both my grandparents were language speakers, but they didn't speak much at all to my dad or my aunts and uncles because of the stigma of boarding schools. And so that generation got skipped. But the grandchildren, though, Pitaepanuhkiw, Jeff, and some of the others, we got a little bit of it. It became a little bit better over time. So he really got an amazing education, and so he does a lot of the identification of archaeological sites on our reservation as a forester. So he goes out and finds these places. And one of the things that he was telling me was that when he finds like a village site, he'll look and see what kind of plants are growing there, because the clans had certain plants, medicines that they would be taken care of, that they would be in charge of. And so when he finds a village site, you can tell which clan was there by the kinds of plants that are still growing around that village site, because we did not only do vegetables, but we did medicines and gathering plants as well around our homesteads, or where we were village sites.
So before our homestead began, Ben was able to see and be involved in actual sites on the reservation of these garden beds. We had a whole year of gardening, and then that fall, Ben took me out into the woods on the reservation to show me, and I didn't know what we were doing, where we were going, just along for the ride, and we got out into the woods, and he's like, "Do you see it?" And I'm like, "See what?" So then like we crouched down a little and we looked, and you could see like the different levels of the gardens and these old ancient sites, and it just gave me chills because that's what we brought back to our garden and our homestead. So going out and seeing it in real life was really cool too.
Yeah, so this is our garden in the winter, and you can when we go out into the woods, you can really see it when the snow's down. You can really see the ridge and furrows out in the ancient sites. And so we wanted to capture that here as well, and what that looks like, and kind of a blanket of possibility, right, for the spring. We're really excited for the spring. Skunks are starting to come out. After that, the cranes will come back, right? So all of these things, all of these different identifiers are happening. We're going to be starting the maple sugar camps, and we're going to be starting our seeds.
And the winter is the time to rest. Like the medicines are resting, the garden is resting, the ground, Mother Earth is resting. We're resting too. But it's really cool to see it just still, even go out there and reflect during the time of rest.
So my brother and I bought a drone a while back. We needed to do it. We needed to try it. We needed to play. This is our homestead from above. You can see where our garden beds are right there. Compost bins, chicken coops are all right there. But then on the right-hand side, you can see where the prairie is. Somebody told me it kind of looked like a buffalo. But what I've been doing is creating little trails for our little kids to come and explore, for us to take walks on, and as I build them, I'm very careful to look and see what the land is saying. I'll go through on where kind of like edges of different plantings are, and I'll create the trails through there. I'll look at where the animal trails are, and I'll make trails through there. That's really important, and so that's why it's not just a circle out there, but it's just a meandering line that goes around through our prairie. And it's going to be something that we're going to be using moving forward to teach with, to teach about our medicinal plants, to teach about the plants that we gather. Your dad found the horseradish, right?
Yeah, we were walking, I'll show you, over here. There's a little horseradish patch, and I walked by it for years and had no idea what it was. And he's like, I'm pretty sure that's horseradish. So we dug it up, and it was like pounds and pounds and pounds of horseradish. So we processed it and we shared it out with people, and it was delicious. But like I walked past it for years and never like knew what it was. So we've been working a lot on like plant identification. Our goal for the upcoming year is having some more signage within our homestead, the trails. We would love to have like some high schoolers come and identify it and be able to talk about it and just go through the trails and have signage in both English and Menominee and Stockbridge, like any of the languages that we use and we speak. Yeah.
With the work that I do with the high school, with the traditional arts program, then we can do the willows for basketry. We can plant out things that we use for dyeing for baskets as well, or and then of course the foods. So there's more than just foods that we're interested in planting. Mm-hmm. And then that area by the horseradish too is where you found the morels.
Yeah, we were foraging for mushrooms too. I was learning about it with my dad and some other tribal members, and it was crazy. Like I would go and get those teachings, I would bring them back, share it with Ben, and then it would be like, boom, I would use my teaching. We were wandering on the homestead, and there were mushrooms that we that we just learned about. Yeah. So yeah, there's lots of different areas to go. Even when we did host a field trip, it was cool to see where the students went. Like they found a tree to hang under, or some shade over there, and there are so many little areas that they can sit and reflect themselves.
Love it. Is that it?
This is our last slide.
Okay.
So I think we're going to do a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back for a few stories.
Yeah.
And some questions, if you have any questions.
Winter is a traditional storytelling time, so I'd like to share some stories if you wouldn't mind. And we'll do a quick break, and we'll come back.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Nelson with the Door County Civility Project. We've been partnering for the last, I believe, 6 years with Door County Auditorium to help bring these speaker series in January and February when everybody is getting cabin fever. And my wife is no exception. I say she gets actually terminal cabin fever, and then terminality applies to me. She's going to kill me if I don't take her someplace. But it's good to get out and be with others. These are great programs. A little bit about the Civility Project. We've been around since 2013 and been doing over 300 presentations on how to speak your peace program, which is what we're trying to do is raise the level of civility in the county. Pay attention, listen, be inclusive, don't gossip, show respect, be agreeable, apologize, give constructive criticism, and take responsibility. And we do our meetings based on training based on what the requests are. We just got done doing 3 two-hour trainings with the sheriff's deputies at the jail. We're going to do a 1-hour training at NWTC for mothers with children, single moms with children that are trying to learn more economic lessons so they can better take care of their families. We actually did one time when I got in trouble because I decided to go to a new approach to the people we're talking to. We're talking to the Manufacturers Association. And so I told them, don't be concerned about incivility in the workplace and trying to raise the level of civility because it's a warm, fuzzy, ethical thing to do. Do it because if you don't, it's going to cost you money. And I took out a $100 bill and a lighter, and I lit the $100 bill on fire. We were at the Sturgeon Bay Utilities at the time, and I did not realize they had a rule against open flames in the building. Needless to say, I had to do the apologize tool here at the time, and I have not been asked back since. So with that, we have a Door County Civility Project.org. We have a Facebook page. Please enjoy. We have a bunch of information on there. You're always welcome to see us. And if you have any groups that you'd like us to do presentations to, just talk to me after the show. Take care and enjoy.
All right. Baby got to eat a little bit. So, wintertime, the time of stories. I'm going to share, I think, maybe 1 or 2 stories, and then we'll open it up to some question and answer. When we as tribal people, pre-contact would come together, they would send a runner, somebody to bring a pipe or a tobacco, and oftentimes they were colored. They would have a piece of fabric or something on them to signify what kind of message that runner would have. And then people would come together, and this is often how like treaty making would happen between tribes. People would come together once that pipe was accepted and smoked, then they would sit down and they would have a mutual respect, mutual understanding. If, say, a Potawatomi person wanted to come in and be among the Menominee hunting grounds, we had this thing, it was called a Pitaepanuhkiw. It's where we all sit down together and share this land. And so a lot of what happens during that time would be like what was called the pipe dance. And, there'd be sharing of songs and sharing of stories and seeds and food and all of the things that go along with being an Indigenous person and having this kind of a greater Indigenous Great Lakes culture. And I think a lot of that happened up here in Door County. A lot of our traditional stories take place right here along the lakeshore. And but since we're talking about education, I wanted to share a story, and I want to recognize one of our teachers at the high school who came here, Marwanan. Appreciate it. We at the high school level, at the grade school level, at the middle school level, the college level, when we're approaching education, you have to believe in the what's called, I think there's a term now, is called social emotional learning. Are our kids ready to learn? As we're coming back from COVID, as more students are returning back to in-person learning, as we move from more, we're totally online to hybrid to in-person, we're going to have to think about what these kids are coming back with, how they're going to be feeling, what kind of traumatic experiences has resulted because of the issues of COVID, because of home life. A lot of our kids, they depend on our schools for meals, for community. There's a lot of isolation that happens, especially way up in South Branch, and just kidding, Wade. And you got to think about, are they ready to learn? And so this story comes from the way north. A man named Johnny Moses told this story originally, the way I heard it. And what he talked about was that the women of his tribe were the story keepers. And when intermarriages happened between tribes, the stories would travel along with the women. If the women would end up in another tribal community, the stories went with them. And so that's how you get people who share stories. Like we share a bunch of different stories with the Ojibwe people. I've listened to some of the winter storytelling Zooms. I'm like, hey, that's our story. That's our story. But no, it's a shared story, right? Because we are so closely interconnected. And so this story in particular is a grandmother pine story. And it starts a kunum, and Lucy always teases me about that. A kunum means a long, long time ago. So when I talk about like being in high school or something, she says, "Oh, you mean a kunum?" And so a kunum, long time ago, this happened. There was this great, huge grandmother pine, and she did so many things for the forest around her. She had very deep roots, and she would bring water up from way, way down and feed the plants around her. And she had lots of family around her, little ones, bigger ones, and she had a very healthy forest. And one day, way off, something was wrong, and the plants knew it. And the plants, in our way, we talk about how the plants would speak to each other. In a more contemporary understanding, we know that the mycelium communicates, and so a lot of the plants can understand, like when there's a forest fire that's happening, they'll send that through the mycelium underground. And so all the plants know and can prepare for that. And so they knew that the forest was speaking, that there was something bad coming, and this great fire came. And Grandmother Pine, she pulled up all of this water into her trunk, and she was telling the ones around her to do the same. But this forest fire, it was too big, it was too massive. And it came blazing across the forest, and it kind of wiped out all the plants and animals, except Grandmother Pine, because she was able to pull enough water and saturate herself to keep from totally burning out. And so after the forest fire had passed, she looked around and saw that there wasn't much left. A lot of her family was gone, and she got really sad. And she started weeping and crying. And way off, Creator heard this crying, and he took pity. And he asked the north wind to carry the seedling to her, this pine cone. And the north wind carried that pine cone and laid it down next to her. And overnight, she looked up from her weeping and saw this little one had popped out of the ground. And it was the only sign of life all around her. It was just kind of a burnt mess. And she took care of it. She pulled water from deep down into her roots and helped nourish this little one. And when this little one felt that nourishment, felt safe, he was able to grow. She called him grandson, Mosesa. And as he grew, his roots grew a little bit deeper, his trunk grew a little bit wider, his branches spread out a little bit further, and she began to impart her knowledge unto him. Everything that she knew about the forest. And one day, some animals started coming back. The forest started to regenerate. And these animals started walking through, and they were eating. They were hungry because there wasn't much left. And they got a little bit too close to the grandson, to Nosasa there, and he got scared. And grandmother, she did something with her branches. She started knocking them together, and the animals scattered. And he felt safe again. He knew those animals weren't going to come and eat him. And so, because he felt safe, he was able to grow. He grew a little bit taller, his trunk grew a little bit wider, his roots grew a little bit deeper, branches grew a little bit wider. And the lessons began again. Grandmother started imparting more and more knowledge about the forest and what needed to happen and what kind of plants needed to come around for us to rebuild. And one day, the sun was getting really hot in the middle of summer, and it felt like grandson felt like his little pine needles were going to burn up. And so grandmother saw this, and she reached her branches over and gave him a little bit of shade. And he felt safe. He felt comfy. He grew a little bit taller, grew a little bit stronger. And again, knowledge was starting to pass. And she taught him as much as she could. Day by day, this happened. And when things happened where grandson felt like he was a little bit sad, grandmother would reach out and call those songbirds, and they would all light on her branches and sing. And it made them both feel good. Felt safe. He grew up a little bit taller. Roots grew a little bit deeper. And when that cold north wind would come through, and we felt like grandson's trunk was going to bend in half, grandmother reached down and held him, kept him safe, kept him from falling over. And grandson grew a little bit taller, a little bit wider, roots grew a little bit deeper. And so they started again, and she was teaching, and year by year, he kept growing and growing because he felt safe. Grandmother kept him safe. She did all these things for him to help him in his journey to become a large tree. And, after years and years and years of grandmother teaching him the songs and stories and teaching him how to call the birds and to reach down into the earth and pull that water up, and he learned all of these things. He learned how, what kind of plants are important to be around, and so they encouraged that, and he learned all of these things. And one day grandmother started feeling a little bit old, a little bit tired. She knew her day was coming closer. And so she talked to grandson. She explained to him what was going to happen, that she was going to pass, she was going to fall, she was going to become part of the earth again. And grandson looked at her and he said, "Don't worry, Grandma. You've taught me everything I needed to know. When you get thirsty, I'll be the one to pull that water up from the earth. When you get sad, I'll be the one to call those birds over. When that wind comes out of the north and it feels like it's going to push you over, I'm going to hold you and keep you up. When that sun's beating down, I'll be there to shade you. And so that's how things went. That's how things go. That's how education gets passed. That's how we, as homesteaders, as observers of the land, as people who are striving to reconnect with our stories with a kind of a shared wisdom. When we listen to our elders, when we listen to our little ones, when we listen to the land, when we listen to the birds, when we listen to the insects, we learn things. But we have to be comfortable doing it. You know, we have to feel safe enough to be able to learn. And I think that's really what we are going to be striving towards, moving ahead, keeping our little ones safe, keeping our kids when they come to school. You know, in my classroom, and Tyler might also be able to attest to this. You know, our kids come in and sometimes they're hungry, so we feed them. Sometimes they're tired, so we let them sleep, because we don't know what's happening to them at home, right? When they feel comfortable, when they feel ready to learn, they come to us. And that's when the real learning happens. That's when we're able to teach them how to beat a bag, when we teach them how to weave a basket, when we teach them how to form pottery. It's not until they are comfortable in my classroom that they're able to do these things. And, you know, when I'm teaching, or when I'm talking to our new teachers, the ones that are going to be working in this charter school, the ones that are going to be working with our immersion students who are going to be teaching in our language, of course they're going to be teaching our kids what they need to know, the cultural aspects that they need to know, but we also need to be able to reach out to people in the community. We need to reach out to Wade to bring in the music and his understanding of how music and history can coexist, right? How important that is for us to be able to convey to our kids in a way that a Western education may not be able to provide for them. All these different things need to happen for them to feel safe and for them to be educated. That's what we needed. That's how we were able to do this. We needed to feel safe again in the pandemic, right? In order for this to happen, we needed to come to an understanding of what our place in our family, in our homestead, in our schools, in our educational capacity with kids. We needed to feel safe. We needed to feel comfortable to be able to approach that again. And I think we're feeling like we're ready, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had to step away for a little while. You have anything to say?
Well, of course. Thinking of like your classroom, my classroom, the world, our homestead, having that safe place where you can cry if you need to cry, heal if you need to heal, reconnect with your ancestors, reconnect with your family. And we really did have to step back from the world to create this, because every day we feel safe in our home, in our homestead, and now it's gotten bigger where we can have people over and have students come and teach them the same values that we're all about. So it's really, really cool to see how that can change and adjust and readjust into the classroom, the world, education. Yeah.
Do we want to do some questions? And then if we have some time, we could maybe invite Wade back up for another song, or I could even tell another story if you'd like. I think they're going to come around with a microphone.
Yes, thank you very much. And is it on? I have lots of questions, but the first one, I just was curious as to the location of the Menominee Indians. Have they always been generally located in the Midwest? And,
Yeah.
and are you on a reservation where your homestead is?
Well, we are on the traditional homelands of the Menominee. Our Menominee people were up in Upper Michigan, through Sault Ste. Marie, up to like Drummond Island, all the way down to Chicago, which is a place in the skunk, right? Yeah. So there's Menominee, Illinois. You know, there's, if you look at, it's really cool. You can look at the place names of on a Wisconsin map, on an Illinois map, on a Michigan map, and you can see the influence of Menominee people, Ojibwe people, Potawatomi people, Ho-Chunk people, just by the cultural geography of our lands. So Oconto, I had a friend of mine asking me if there were names up here in Door County, and I couldn't figure out like if there were names, but I know like Sturgeon Bay, it was definitely Nama, and it was probably translated at some point into Sturgeon Bay.
Well, and I also just finished a book. Pardon? Oh, I've also finished just reading a book by Louise Erdrich, The Night Watchman, and they talk about that in 1953, Congress wanting, which of course I had never heard about, and they mentioned that the Menominee people were one of the ones that managed not to be affected by it. Was that something that was talked about in your family growing up?
Yeah, 1953 is also the time of the termination era. Our tribe was slotted for termination. We had won a lawsuit against the government for mismanagement of funds of our forest, and so we won. And so part of winning that lawsuit was that we had to accept terms of termination. And there's many different sides of how that history actually went down, who signed for that, who decided on how that happened. And we could have 20 different Menominees up here and you'll get 20 different stories. But you know, that time, that 1953 was kind of a dark period for us. We were one of the richest tribes in the country at that time. We had self-sufficiency. We had our own electric power. We had our own hospital. We had our own, you know, everything. And then they decided that because we were so successful, that their treaty obligations to us could be terminated. And part of that termination was also that we had to pay for it. And so that any kind of surplus that we had as Menominee people then got depleted to try and pay for the termination of our status as Menominee people, which was reversed eventually in the 1970s. Yeah.
We've got a question over here. Gary, you said at the break you have 24 questions. Let's just start with one or two, okay?
Lawrence University has 20,000 artifacts or more that came out of Door County and northern Kewaunee County. Does UWGB have access to those artifacts?
I think that the Menominee Tribal Historic Preservation Office, they would definitely be the ones that they work with the NAGPRA, Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So my uncle in his capacity is aware of all of those different places.
Somebody by the name of Ed Wells of Forestville was the primary person who found all these, along with Roy Lucas and several other people. So again, it's very much Door County that's historically preserved. So
Yeah.
I hope it gets passed on.
Yeah, in our traditional stories, we hear a lot of like about the different places here in Door County. I know that there's one in particular where there's somewhere just south of Sturgeon Bay along the coast, there's supposed to be an area where rocks have been lined up according to the moon cycles. I'm not sure where it is. It's something that we might have to go out and search out. But yeah, the prevalence of indigenous people here in Door County, it was sometimes there were Menominee, sometimes there were Ho-Chunk, sometimes there were Potawatomi at different times, at different periods, and it'd be interesting to look at some of that stuff and try and figure out what the date is, and then figure out who was there and when. And unfortunately, like I was talking about my cousin Pamapame, being able to go on our reservation and look because it has been undisturbed, it hasn't been farmed, and see what kind of plants are growing there, so we could figure that out from that kind of a botanical, archaeological survey of the area. So it's kind of hard to do when they're in a box and you're not exactly sure, like especially like early archaeology when it was kind of a dig into a mound and pull out what you can, and a lot of that history wasn't recorded the way it is now. Now they have the LiDAR and stuff like that, and I haven't been keeping up with current archaeological trends, but it's really interesting to see my work as a traditional artist. I get to help my kids look at some of those objects like you're referring to. We go to our museum, we go to the Field Museum in Chicago. I took a group of kids down there, and we're able to look and see the objects that were made and how can we remake them again. One of the most fun projects I do with my clay class is I'll bring them in, and my classroom had no windows, so I would turn the lights out. I'd put a piece of clay in their hands, turn the lights out, and I want them to envision, like, what do you think your original ancestor did with a piece of clay? How did they form something out of nothing? How did we figure out how to make a clay vessel? And then have them sit and do this in the dark when they can't see, and just really get a feel of what that clay is and what it can do. And then when I turn the lights on, then we see what our objects look like.
Could you, I know that the Menominee Forest is just a wonderful example now used as a model for good forestry all over the world. Could you explain a little bit about the history of the Menominee forests?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is a model of sustainability. People from around the world do come and look at us. You can see the outline of the Menominee Reservation from space because of the dense forest and forest management practices that have been in place since popular stories that Oshkosh talked about. Chief Oshkosh talked about creating that logging industry and how we would log from the west side or the east side of the forest to the west side, and when that was done, then we could repeat it again. But yeah, our forest is, if you ever get a chance to come visit and take a ride through 47 and 55, you can see, like, as you're coming into the reservation, it'd be farmland, and then dense forest. So much that it affects the weather patterns going over because of I believe it's the oxygen coming up off the trees. So our climate is definitely impressive. Yeah.
If you can look online of from space down to Earth, you can see the trees over the Menominee area.
Yeah, I know they use it for aligning satellites. I remember driving up into the reservation and seeing a military drone flying over me, and then when it hit the line, it went north, with the line of trees. So it's definitely a landmark for many different things.
How many acres is your homestead?
Our homestead is 5.
I think altogether.
Altogether is 5.
Mhm.
Yeah.
About your homestead, I had a question about your prairie grass. Do you, how do you, in the spring, take care of it? Do you rake it or do you burn it off?
Yeah,
How's that handled?
we started doing the burning,
The biochar.
creating, biochar is one way. But yeah, the practice of burning out understory in forests is a long time practice of Indigenous people across the nation. So yeah, I think because it's so new, it's so fresh for us. We've only really done prairie restoration for the last 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
It's we were going to try different methods and see if we can get it to be as close to original as possible, along with our including things that we can use for cordage, fibers, basketry things, and then the dyes and the medicines, natural medicines.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really want it to be a place of teaching so that we can bring our kids and our adults and those that are looking to reconnect with an Indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge keepers, so that we are able to identify maybe in our little homestead and then bring it back out to a wider community so they know what the plants look like, what they're used for.
I'm reading a book called Surviving Genocide, and I'm wondering, there was a unique history with the Menominee that during the period when all First Nations were forced to relocate, it was my understanding, as I recall, that the Menominee had a special arrangement with the government. Were you actually part of a removal, or were you always there where you are now?
Yeah, our creation story takes place at the mouth of the Menominee River. That's where we became Menominee. During that time of removal, the Stockbridge people came, the Haudenosaunee, the Oneida came, the Wyandot people came through. There was a lot of different tribes that came through. There's a lot of history of trails that were created by Potawatomi and helped maintain in this part of the area of the world by the Menominee that reached from Detroit all the way out this way, where people would come as they're being forced westward. We, as Menominee people, were asked to look at a place out in Minnesota, and so our chiefs went out there and looked at it and came back and said, no, we're not going to be moved. And I think that that a lot of that, we owe a lot of credit to having those interactions with tribes that were moving east, that we understood a little bit better, that we should not be forced from our lands, that we had to fight for the places that our stories come from, that our medicines are. And I think that having Stockbridge people come in and be among us helped us inform our refusal to move west into Minnesota.
Hi there. We are actually Menominees, and we grew up in this area. So this is a really neat thing to hear. But we were fortunate to go back to the reservation and be taught by our elders. And one of the things that they have really imparted on us is the creation story, honoring our creator. And so I'm curious to hear how, not only in your homestead, but in your teaching, how you guys honor the Creator in everything that we do, and just to share that.
Okay. Well, when I asked Lucy to marry me, I had a ring made, and the stones in the ring represent the sunset and the sunrise. That's something very, very personal to us. That's something that we, as a couple, honor in the morning when we wake up, in the evening before we go to bed, and so I think that that being close to that creation, by honoring the sunset, that transition period between sunrise, the night and sunrise, and then into the day, and then finishing off that balance at the night, by being in the land, acknowledging like Lucy said, singing to the bees. She also sings to the plants and sings to the baby. Those things, like all those different things, have deeper meaning that we are coming to understand as we, it's not like we were taught and now this is how it's done. It's kind of a reclamation of understanding that that creation can be in so many different things. It can be in like I was talking about with the clay, like that creation, that moving from something that is intangible to something more tangible, in working through that clay, working through those arts, and creating in the arts, in the language, and understanding the language, and figuring out that, moving beyond a direct translation in our language to really understand, like breaking our words apart and getting a better understanding of what the Menominee worldview is. Like I was talking about Kakena-Wapata, our school, and how it means we learn by observing, but it's not just a learn like we all understand learn, right? It's an understanding, a deeper understanding by observing. There's this really cool, I can't remember the name. It's got this really long scientific name, but people are starting to look at like how humans learn how to collect medicines by observing animals in the forest. Zoopharmacology, something like that. Sorry, but it's true. When you look at our stories, you learn about how we would learn medicines from the bear people, and yeah, now they're finding the scientific ways and how people would observe bears in the forest collecting certain plants to put on their wounds to help heal them. And so, connecting, I find that to be a direct line to my ancestry when I come upon those realizations of those things that happened, those things that were understood by our people for thousands of years, we were disconnected from, and now we're coming back to again. And not that we're all disconnected from it, we're gathering knowledge from different places. Like for instance, one example of that is as I was in some of the collections looking at some of the artifacts of Menominee people, I found these woven bags, and they had these amazing designs on them. And when you flip the bag over, it was a totally different design on the other side. And trying to figure out, how did that happen? Why do we choose to do it like that? How did we, I was okay with weaving. I could figure it out pretty well. But when I looked at these bags, I'm like, how did they do this? I had no idea. And then pandemic came, and all of these different people from around the world started offering classes. And so I was looking at Maori down in New Zealand, and they have the same weaving that we do. And so I took an online class with a Maori person to figure out how we wove bags in Menominee. And it was a very humbling experience to be able to do that. And now I'm going to be teaching that again, like bringing that art back. And so now we have to we figure out how to do the designs, but why do we do the designs? Why do we choose the colors we chose to do? What do the designs mean? Why is there something different on the other side? A lot of this knowledge is lost, but we're bringing it back. We're going to figure it out. We're going to use careful observation through creation to figure those things out.
Segu Ben, I'm Colleen. I taught you
Colleen.
metalsmithing at the arts program. And my folk artist is over there, Gabrielle. I just wanted to add a comment to yours. And I used to teach at the Turtle School, and then I do residencies through the arts program. And what I like to say in the public schools, and to all my students actually, is just that we are creation, therefore we create. It's not like this special thing that only certain people can do. Because I don't just do metalsmithing. I'm like you, I do weaving and pottery, and I couldn't decide when I was in, the formal education of public school. I'm like, why do I have to just pick one thing?
Mm-hmm.
You don't. So I just wanted to add that. We are creation, therefore we create.
And the
I think
learning
we
never
have
ends,
time.
as a Colleen.
Sorry. I think we have time for another question or two. You might get the floor. Gary's used to be my landlord, so we joke. I want to thank all of you for coming. This has been a wonderful series thus far. I hope you will join us again next week for the final of the series, the Ho-Chunk History. We also encourage you again to tune in tonight to Wade's online concert. That'll be 7 p.m. on Facebook. Thank you so much, Lucy and Ben, for coming. We're so honored to have you with us.
Yeah.
And also thank you to our partners, UWGB First Nations and Door County Civility Project. So you almost get to close out the show. We're going to give those honors to Wade.
One more question? Okay. I grew up in Milwaukee, and on 26th and Bolete was kind of a Native American center. My question is, are people, Native, Indigenous, moving to the cities or moving back to the reservations or to your land, as we would say? What's the direction?
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both, yeah. Yeah, there's like for me, I went out and I experienced the world. Like Wade, toured Europe for a little bit, not playing music or anything, but just to kind of find myself. Gone down to like Peru and to the Mayan lands. Went and got my education and decided that I was gathering all of these things to bring home to help me connect to home, and to help bring that knowledge to the people, to help them connect as well. And I'm not saying that I have all the answers or that any of us have all the answers, but as Indigenous people, we have a community. Like Colleen helped me figure out how to do silversmithing again. And that was amazing. And I loved that class, and it was really cool. And it has helped inform how we move back to bring that knowledge back. And some people are deciding that they need to be away. In the 1950s, I think it was the 1950s, they had where people were paid to leave the reservation to be in the city, and that's my dad's generation. And so my dad lived in Wausau, he lived in San Francisco, doing jobs like welding on giant boats and things like that. Like you get those chances to go out and experience different things and then come home again. And I think that's a lot. That's for those of us that have gone out and done those other things, that there's always that longing to be back home. Because this is the land of our ancestors, the land that we're standing on right now. We have stories connected to this place. We have songs connected to this place. We have medicines. We have arts connected to this place. And your soul gravitates back to that, I feel like. You need to be a part of that. You need to walk out and see those things as you're traveling around and connecting with creation. That's all a part of it.
Poso.
Hey, Poso.
That's Menominee with a little bit of a Norwegian accent. Many people in this area are familiar with Chief Oshkosh, or the name. Could you share just a brief description of his importance to the Menominee tribe?
Oh, yeah. Well, Chief Oshkosh was the one that helped us to decide that we weren't going to be displaced, that we weren't going to move. Yeah. He was the one that talked about the forest management practices. A lot of that is attributed to him, and it goes back to those old chief lines that go way back. And yeah, Oshkosh was somebody that I think every Menominee person knows and everybody connects with, and probably has a different understanding of who he is, because history is not always. You can't just go out and read a book about it. You have to also go out and talk to the ancestors. The descendants. I'm sorry, not ancestors. The descendants of Oshkosh. They'll have different stories than any book that you'll read. Community members have different understandings. So it's really about going out and getting that knowledge. It's not always best just written. Maybe it's a song, maybe it's a story. I'm sorry, I hope that helps. Should we bring Wade out? Yeah. All right. Well, Ryan and everyone.
Yes, thank you.
I'm not quite this short.
Almost.
I want to do a song to finish off that I guess when I was listening to the story about the pine tree, the mother, the grandmother, and I was thinking, when I was sitting there, I was thinking about the resilience that we have as Indigenous people, the resilience like of Ben and Lucy to do the homestead, to do something when it looks like there's not much hope, with COVID coming, all these things. It's the same story with our ancestors. They had to face all this oppression, had to face all this disease coming, had to face all these things and somehow survive. And so I want to share something with you, a song and a spoken word, and it's called Nokame. Nokame means my grandmother. That's the spoken word part. Ninakemen and Nokame, I sing for you, my grandmother. And as you're listening, maybe you can find yourself and your ancestors and your resilience in it, because that's how we heal, looking back to how we survived, how our people survived, and then learning from the stories that you hear, learning from the information that you gather by listening and sharing. So when I was a little boy, I used to walk into my grandmother's house, and she could hear the screen door open up, and then she would wonder who it was, and so she'd call me because she knew it was one of her grandchildren. She could hear the footsteps, and so then I'd walk in there and I'd crawl up onto her lap on in the rocking chair that she was sitting in. And she was blind already from diabetes at that time, and she was only 50, which is a few years younger than me. And then at 55, she passed away. So I was a little boy, and I was sitting on my grandmother's lap, and she would feel my face to see which grandchild I was. And then as I was growing up, then I would think about, how do I get that knowledge? How am I able to get those stories, all those things that pass with our elders? Because I couldn't ask the questions, because she passed when I was 5, and when you're 5 years old, your questions are, can I go potty, So it kind of bothered me, but then as time went by, all of a sudden one day I was walking home from school, and I felt all of a sudden that my grandmother was walking with me, and these words came out, and then a song came with the drum, and that's what I'm going to share with you. But it was that realization that everything that we need is there. It's like when Waqnahwew, when Ben was talking about that story about the blanket. We lost all these pieces, it seems like, but what we're finding keeps us warm, patches that blanket back together. And so that's the important part of this piece, is to remember that what we really truly need, we can get. And I've traveled all around Europe and around the world, and I remember people in Europe asking me, how do we find our culture? How do we find our indigenous roots? And it happens when you turn off the TV. It happens when you step out into nature, when you walk on the earth, when you put your hands in the earth, and you listen. That's when it all comes back together and keeps you warm. So, spoken word followed by the song, and I really appreciate Ben and Lucy coming out and doing this and sharing what they have for you, and for you coming out and sharing yourselves, because that's what makes it work, and this reciprocal thing of sharing and giving and learning. A warm smile framed by dark, beautiful brown skin. A loving hand gently tracing the face of a 5-year-old boy. Come to me, she said. And I crawled onto her lap. And I grabbed onto that old brown sweater that she wore like the robe of a queen. And I looked into her peaceful eyes, the gentle eyes that had succumbed to diabetes. What did your hands see, Nokome? Were they looking at the future? Were they giving me a piece of your spirit, or some knowledge or desire that would awaken in my coming of age? Were you giving me the music that made your children cry with its sadness? Did you see the ways of our ancestors fading? I wonder if anyone still remembers the Menominee Song, the one that you sang just before you sent your body back to the earth. Or was it lost, like so much of our culture, like so many of our people, to diabetes? Lost, like the gentle and kind Menominee way? Or is it still there, buried under television, alcohol, in our search for selfish fulfillment? Can we dig it up just enough to let it breathe, to let it live and grow, to remember our language and awaken. I'm a man now, Nokome, but I still feel your hands on my face, and your music pours out of me like tears from your soul. And my heart, it feels like it beats with you, echoing your words. Wake up. We are alive. We are surviving. And we must pass this on. And thank you so much for coming out and for Ben and Lucy.